Unveil the ancient world where sex, religion, and nature intertwined. Explore the enigmatic roles of sacred prostitutes in fertility rites, from stimulating deities to influencing plant growth. Journey through rituals under moonlit trees, secret incantations, and mystical symbols, revealing the profound impact of female sexuality on ancient beliefs and practices. Discover how these timeless traditions shaped our understanding of fertility and divinity. Sacred prostitution and fertility rites, an ancient intersection of sex, religion, and vegetation. In the incantation to the pine-resin, the little ones were said to have engendered by a sacred prostitute. This cultic office was well known in the ancient world. It is usually assumed that the woman dedicated herself to the service of the god as a sexual partner in some imitative ritual designed to stimulate the generative faculties of the fertility deity. Doubtless in many of the cults she did perform such a function, having intercourse before the altar with the priests or other male worshippers at certain festivals. However, this was not her only form of service, or even necessarily her prime function, as indicated by the Vegetation reference of the kukru incantation. In the Bible, the cultic title is used in one case when the woman plays the part of a common whore, where Tamar seduced her father-in-law at the roadside. But elsewhere, the sacred prostitute plays her proper religious role and is associated, like her sister, of the kukru incantation with hills and trees. Thus, Hosea describes the apostate Israelites as harlots, sacrificing on the tops of mountains, making offerings upon the hills, under oak, poplar, and terebinth, because their shade is good. The Old Testament also speaks of male cult prostitutes, called otherwise dogs. It is more likely that these persons were sodomites and not servants to the female worshippers as counterparts to the feminine cult prostitutes. In this case, the epithet dog is not necessarily a term of abuse, but merely descriptive of their manner of intercourse. It is perhaps significant that one of the Sumerian terms for chanter priest is gala, elsewhere meaning womb, with a semantic equivalent ushku, literally penis anus. Their prime purpose may have been as a means of providing or extracting semen for cultic purposes, particularly for the priest's anointing as a symbolic phallus before the god, a Christ. Sacred rituals and fertility practices, the role of female cult prostitutes in ancient botany. The female cult prostitute played a key role related to the plant's growth. In a ritual called kukru, she was believed to help produce small organisms from a tree's resin, known as menses. It's likely that her role involved using charm to encourage the growth of a mushroom, which symbolized a small penis. According to Josephus, pouring a woman's menses and urine on the mandrake plant was thought to keep it from shrinking and make it stay still. If the cult prostitute was present, she may have directly exposed her genitals to the ground where the mushroom was believed to be. This practice of menstruating women exposing themselves for plant-related purposes was recorded in other places. Pliny mentioned that to counter the harmful effects of menses on insects, women would walk around a cornfield naked, causing the insects to fall to the ground. This discovery was first made in Cappadocia, where women walked through fields with their clothes pulled up due to a plague of Spanish fly. It seems like it was necessary to create some kind of booth or covering for the witch and the magic plant during this seduction. Hosea mentioned that the sacred prostitutes practiced their art under trees where the shade is good. Ezekiel described the activities of female necromancers and talked about some kind of full-length veil they used to ensnare souls. The holy plant had to be uprooted under the cover of darkness to avoid being seen by the woodpecker of Mars or the sun and moon. Among the Akkadian magical texts is an instruction for the uprooting of the tigula, the bolt or phallus plant or mushroom. We have already encountered the Sumerian original of this name, Ukush-T Gila, which gave the Greek name glucoside, glycoside for the holy plant. Rituals of concealment and fertility, practices and symbolism in ancient cults. The necessity for covering oneself and the magic plant during the process of taking it from the ground reminds one of Josephus when describing the mysterious Essenes. In the midst of an important passage about their manner of discipline, he turns aside to tell us exactly how they performed their natural functions. They dig a trench a foot deep with a mattock. Such is the nature of the small axe which they present to the neophytes, and wrapping their mantle about them, that they may not offend the rays of the deity, they squat above it. They then replace the excavated soil in the trench. For this purpose, they select the more desolate places, and although this discharge of the excrement is a natural function, they make it a rule to wash themselves after it, as if defiled. The rules in Jewish law mention everything here except the ritual purification, which is just common sense camp hygiene. The author may be sharing secret knowledge by describing this normal practice as indicated by the reference to the rays of the deity and the lustration. When gathering mushrooms, the mushroom seeker used methods such as drawing circles around the plant and themselves with a sword, believed to have magical powers. Another method was to sprinkle flour around the plant, as instructed in an ancient incantation. These actions were seen as ways to offer protection and compensation to the earth for harvesting the mushrooms. Similarly, seers offered atonement to the pine tree when taking the precious resin called elithia, the menses. The fundamental principle of fertility philosophy was that of balance, as we have previously noted. To take any of the fruits of the earth necessitated some measure of compensation or sacrifice to the god. To be effective, this return payment should be at least qualitatively equivalent to the gift received, so that only the best of the harvest, the first reaped of the corn, and firstborn of the animals was suitable. In the case of an especially powerful plant like the sacred mushroom, an atoning substitution posed special problems. Since the fungus was the god himself made manifest on earth, no atoning sacrifice by mortals could suffice. The seeker could only bring along with him the holy plant itself or some symbol of it, and this is probably the explanation of a curious phrase in Josephus's description of the seizing of the mandrake. To touch it is fatal unless one succeeds in bringing along the thing itself, the root, hanging from one's hand. The use of the verb epiphero refers to the bringing of a dowry by a bride to her husband, or the supplying of his own rations by the soldier himself during a campaign. In other words, only the god can atone for himself, and herein lies the basis of the Christian doctrine of the incantation and atonement, which we must examine afresh in its cultic context. Ezekiel, in describing the necromantic ritual of the witches, says they fastened magic bands, kesator, on their wrists, and with them trapped souls like birds. This rare word is related to the Sumerian kishu, meaning some kind of magical imprisonment, but we have to look to Greek for its precise significance. The word kiste comes from the Latin word cista and was used as a container in certain secret rituals of the Dionysiac cult. It was believed to hold hidden tools. Whenever the cista is depicted, it is shown as a basket with a snake coming out of it. On sarcophagi with Bacchic scenes like the cista is shown being opened by Pan, and a snake is seen coming out of the half-opened lid. The snake is an important symbol in the Dionysiac cult and its imagery. In Euripides, Bacchae, the Maenads have snakes in their hair and around their bodies. The snake was also the special symbol of the Phrygian Sabazios, Sabadius, who is identified with Dionysus. Serpents and sacred fungi, the mystical connection in ancient mythology. It is not difficult to see the reasoning behind the ancient connection between the serpent and the mushroom, which played such a large part in mushroom folklore and mythology. Both emerged from holes in the ground in a manner reminiscent of the erection of the sexually awakened penis, and both bore in their heads a fiery poison which the ancients thought could be transferred from one to the other. If the hole of a serpent, writes Pliny, has been near the mushroom, or should a serpent have breathed on it as it first opened, its kinship to poison makes it capable of absorbing the venom. So it would not be well to eat mushrooms until the serpent has begun to hibernate. The prime example of the relation between the serpent and the mushroom is, of course, in the Garden of Eden story of the Old Testament. The cunning reptile prevails upon Eve and her husband to eat of the tree, whose fruit make them as gods knowing good and evil. The whole Eden story is mushroom-based mythology, not least in the identity of the tree as the sacred fungus, Even as late as the 13th century, some recollection of the old tradition was known among Christians, to judge from a fresco painted on the wall of a ruined church in Plaincourt in France. There, the Amanita muscaria is gloriously portrayed entwined with a serpent while Eve stands by holding her belly. The Bacchic Cista and Ezekiel's witches' magic bands were probably meant to represent the lower cup of the mushroom vulva, the little basket from which the stalk of the fungus emerged, like a snake being charmed from its box. In this conception lies the origin of such stories as Moses, the emergent serpent, as now we may understand his name to mean in his papyrus ark, and Dionysus and Jesus in their mangers, in essence, covered baskets. As objects attached to wrists of the sacred prostitutes at the mushroom-raising ceremony, these replicas of the matted vulva, perhaps already divided to reveal the emergent mushroom stem, were probably intended to offer a kind of imitative encouragement to the dormant fungus to open and reveal itself. The enigmatic power of female sexuality in ancient cults and beliefs. The ability of women to arouse men in ancient times was seen as almost magical and was met with fear and suspicion. Some mystic groups used the sexual power of women in their secret rituals. For example, Josephus mentioned the Essenes and their belief that women were not faithful to one man, which led them to be cautious in their interactions with women. Of that order of Essenes who did marry, he says, they think that those who declined to marry cut off the chief function of life, the propagation of the race, and what is more, that were all to adopt the same view, the whole race would very quickly die out. However, they give their wives 3 years probation and only marry them after they have given proof of fecundity for 3 periods of purification. They have no intercourse with them during pregnancy, thus showing that their motive in marrying is not self-indulgence, but the procreation of children. One is reminded of the Church's oft-reiterated edict that the purpose of marriage is the procreation of children. It comes as something of a shock to us in the Western world, after centuries of religiously inspired Puritanism, to learn that the ancients attributed the greater inclinations towards sexual indulgence to women. It was said that Zeus and Hera chose the seer Tiresias to decide on the question of whether the male or the female derived the most pleasure from sexual intercourse. He replied, "Of the 10 parts of coitus, a man enjoys 1 only, but a woman's senses enjoy all 10 to the full." However that may be, there is no doubt that the sexual power of women was vital to the mystery cults and accounts in considerable measure for their attractiveness to women from the earliest times. It also has much to do with the antagonism towards sexuality, generally the distrust of women displayed by the later church, and the readiness with which Christians hounded supposed witches until relatively recent times. The telepathic control over people's minds exercised by such females, known to the world as the evil eye, came originally from this ability to arouse men's passions. The Latin farnicus, from which our fascination comes, as well as meaning bewitching, was also the proper name of a deity whose emblem was the erect penis. And this, indeed, as we can now appreciate, is the original source of this word and the Greek haskanos, sorcerer. It was believed that the malign influences of fascination, which came to be extended to any form of mental manipulation or control exercised by such women, could cause significant harm and bring about dire consequences. Ancient rituals reveal a fascinating blend of sex, religion, and nature, shedding light on the profound role of sacred prostitutes in fertility rites. If you enjoyed uncovering these secrets of the past, hit the like button, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe for more intriguing explorations. Don't forget to comment your thoughts below. Until next time.